The mountain-like and dragon-mouthed elephants were furnished with suits of mail and defensive armour and made ready for war. All the elephants had these war panoplies and had their trunks armed with spears and knives and were entrusted to men of war and to courageous drivers. What's being described are fearsome war elephants fully clad in armour like the one you see behind me. This is the very famous elephant armour that's in the Royal Armoury's collection. It's one of the most iconic treasures that the museum owns, as the largest animal armour known to be on display in a public collection anywhere in the world. Armoured elephants are known to have been used on the battlefields of South Asia from around the 11th century onwards, or at least that's when they start to appear in the accounts that still survive. When properly trained, elephants could be devastatingly destructive weapons of war. They were obviously incredibly strong, and they were capable of carrying entire crews of armed warriors on their backs into battle. They would be driven by a driver or a mahout who would be equipped with a goad or an ankus, which he would use to steer the elephant. In addition to being essentially mobile war platforms, elephants could also fight. They were trained to trample enemy men and horses, and they could also pick up a warrior and his steed bodily and throw them. To make them even more fearsome, elephants were often equipped with tusk swords, like the incredibly rare example I have here. As you can see, these were extremely robust weapons. They had these big reinforced sockets here and rings through which presumably they would have been strapped securely to the shortened tusk of the elephant. The tusk would probably have been shortened to about there, and then the sword attached over the stump like this. The blades have enormous reinforced points which could have pierced pretty much anything on the battlefield with the force of a charging elephant behind them. So they could be used to rout enemy forces on the field, or the elephants could ram doors, or they could even sweep troops off the walls of fortifications. Just as warriors and horses could be clad in armour, so could elephants. Their armour worked along very similar principles. It was just on a much bigger scale, obviously. The example that the Royal Armouries holds is of a structure known as mail and plate. It's a very strong and yet flexible defence, and it was used for all sorts of body armour, particularly across northern and central India during these centuries. It covered most of the vulnerable areas on the elephant's body and offered a really good overall protection from arrows, from enemy blades such as swords and spears, and even to a certain extent from musket fire. It's very clear, looking at the magnificent armour behind me, that elephants clad in armour and wielding tusk swords must have been a terrifying phenomenon on the battlefields of South Asia. Even when firearms and artillery started to become more prevalent on the battlefield and diminished the practical function of fighting elephants, they retained this incredibly imposing reputation. Even today, this armour is still revered by audiences in the museum for its gargantuan size and image of immense power.